panel discussion, okay? It's called Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Laws and Regulations 2023. So let me welcome our moderator, Surya Sarela, CEO at Blocksoul Media. This is where you guys clap hand. And the panelists, let's welcome Andy Lian, best-selling book author, NFT From Zero to Hero. Chris Holland, HM partner. Keep those claps coming. Let's go. Ah, nice. Yes. Next is Mike Chiam, PD legal partner, ABA founding member. Next, we have Tuhu Nugraha, Executive Director of Indonesia Blockchain and Metaverse Center, IBMC. And the final one is Matthew Townsend, Reed Smith, LLP partner. So once again, let's give a round of applause to our moderator and our panelists with the title Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Laws and Regulation 2023. Take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you. We chose these 5 speakers because they represent each part of this debate. They are important stakeholders doing their part in a private way, in a public way, and in a policy way. So I'd like to ask each of you, from your perspective, to kick things off and answer this question and start framing it for the audience. Are the countries or the regulators around the world moving or heading towards banning or discouraging crypto? Chris, would you like to start?
Some are, for sure. I mean, we don't see countries acting uniformly. And ideally, every industry just wants a standard set, a consistent set of rules and laws that they can apply. But when you think about it, are tax laws the same? Are tax rates the same around the world? They certainly are not. So we should not anticipate that crypto regulation is going to be treated the same. There are countries that are relatively hostile. Brazil has made Bitcoin legal tender. That's pretty welcoming, right? So there's a range. We're not going to see complete banning around the world, but certainly this has been a rough regulatory period for crypto, and the last few months, the SEC, the US, has really been quite stern with it.
Yes, anybody else from the panel?
Yeah, so I'm here from Hong Kong, where I'm based, and certainly looking at Singapore, looking at UAE, looking at Hong Kong, looking also at the European Union and the UK. There are, I would say, some fairly encouraging crypto-related regulations anticipated or announced, or even in the process of coming into force. And they're balanced against permitting crypto transactions, but also trying to foster financial stability. And certainly in Hong Kong, which is the jurisdiction I know, but also certainly in Singapore, we're seeing a VASP, virtual asset service provider program, and coming into force in June this year. And the Hong Kong Monetary Authority has issued some fairly, I'd say fairly sensible opinions on regulating stablecoins, which certainly will not be an industry killer, but should, certainly the aim is to facilitate useful investment.
Maybe I would just add on a bit. You know, I have been talking to different regulators and different governments, you know, since 2018. I realized that most of the government or the regulators right now, they are all very open. You know, in fact, only the handful that we can think of are a bit, you know, anti-cryptocurrency right now. You know, so based on one of the comment that I've given to South China Morning Post this morning, you know, about some G20 development. You know, India wanted to look at a more uniform regulatory approach and so forth. You know, by having that agenda, you know, we can also say very safely that, well, you know, big nations like India, and a lot of other members are very receptive and open to welcome cryptocurrency, right? But again, my question to the reporter yesterday was, are we ready for uniform regulations? Then that is where, my good friend here, Chris, has mentioned, maybe it's too early, right? But again, going back to the point, yes, I think countries are very much open right now. Yeah.
The one thing I'd say in response to that, I mean, Singapore has been pretty clear that they think cryptocurrencies, by and large, are highly speculative assets that they don't want retail participating in, and they're supportive of the technology, but they are completely against speculation and think most cryptocurrencies are speculative. So at least Singapore, I would not say, is embracing cryptocurrency with open arms. They're supportive of strong financial institutions and intermediaries in the technology, but show them a coin, they are not going to be giving a thumbs up.
I want to add on. I think for countries like Singapore, for example, if we are talking about the top few coins in the world that has a very, maybe a longer, history, I think they see those cryptocurrency, that small basket, as something that's maybe acceptable, right? But if you look at the rest of those that are down the line, top 1,000 on coin market cap, of course they will be very skeptical about it, So I think this is two different things.
Maybe I'll try to answer Surya in a different way. I think when we talk about this part of the world, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia, we're talking about different kinds of crypto adoption and application. Singapore started with the digital payment token description of crypto, which I think represents only a sliver, one aspect of a hybrid set of features that crypto represents. I think today when you talk about crypto, the world will adopt and issue CBDCs. There will be security or securities tokenization of real world assets. I think the question is whether money will take the form of crypto and become legal tender. Those are rather the exceptions, like in Brazil and Venezuela. This part of the world seems to really love the idea of asset tokenization. So I think we're going to see that come in a big way this year and next year. Just today, I think I replied to the Labuan regulator on some of the draft frameworks that they are trying to release on securitization and tokenization of certain assets. In a year that is likely to be a recession for TradFi, may open doors in different ways for crypto firms.
Yeah, I think I will share you with Indonesian perspective what's happening, because I involved in the government in terms of recommendations, and then I know what they were thinking about this part. And they move so fast, actually, like right now, the crypto from BAPEPT go to OJK means they change it just only for a community, right? Not become like digital assets and asset tokenizations, like it has been said before. So in Indonesia, they will see like, okay, we cannot against with these new innovations, but how the government can protect all the society from scam, rug pull, and everything. So the government quite open with that. Although like last year, we wanted to even wanted to have a blockchain exhibition, and the government said, oh no, there's no from BAPT and everything, because it's the exhibition from the government side. But right now, they moving so fast. And then I agree with the CBDC. I think like the future about transaction, they will use the CBDC. But the government will allow about this crypto as part of the legal asset and everything. That's why all the countries right now is like racing for the CBDC, because they want to see like more stable for their economics, and then the stability of their whole economy. So I think like the countries right now still trying with different approach to get this world. But in Indonesia, I think like there is a lot of use case of blockchain crypto, and outside just only for the transactions. And right now, a lot of people like exploring how the manufacturing can reduce the cost and everything. And I hope that the government, I also involved 2021 to give a recommendation on how blockchain can be used for the society, because a lot of people, the stakeholder from the industry, already asking to the government, how is the regulation about this blockchain, and the government is trying to respond to make some kind of research and recommendations. This year, the government will use the blockchain and metaverse for the public service, because I also involved on that part. They try to piloting this year for how the government uses public service using this one, reducing costs to make it more a smooth experience for the society and everything. So crypto and blockchain to be a part of giving solutions for current issues, especially for the Indonesian market.
I mean, when you look at a larger scale, at a global policy level, we see that China banned all forms of decentralized cryptocurrency in favor of implementing their own digital one. We saw India is heading the G20 right now, and the Indian finance minister came out and said that a currency is a currency only when it is issued by the central bank. We also saw what's happening recently with US Securities Exchange, SEC, and the CFTC are odds at each other on the nature of Ethereum. Like, you know, they're saying Ethereum, CFTC says Ethereum is a commodity, and SEC says, oh, now they moved from proof of work to proof of stake, so it's now a security. So they're at odds there. And we also saw recently, the last 2 weeks, what happened with Kraken Exchange. They were fined $30 million for offering a staking program. And not to forget what happened last year with FTX, Terra Luna, Celsius, and 3AC. So from the regulator's perspective, and also from the crypto community, there are a lot of gaps in the space. So nobody's really clear as to where the regulations are heading. So, and do you, like, can you just lay this out for where is this heading, like, in the coming years, or especially in 2023?
Yeah, I think that's in 2023, what I see from Indonesia and the global from the world, is like what's the interest of countries and the government is how to protect the whole society. So what we must do from the crypto community perspective is how to educate and then talk and make a dialogue to the governments, how it can be like protecting the society, how to make a more fair situations, because if we don't do the education to the government, they will always like stop. I don't want, because there's no regulations. I'm so scared with this one. That's how they're always thinking. But at some point, they also understand that the new innovation cannot be stopped. So we must find a middle way how we can protect this part. For example, like the crypto, what people always know is about scam, speculations, and rug pull and everything. And what's the government concern is how to protect these incompetent persons to involve in this kind of situations. I think that's the perspective of the government. Second one, they're always concerned how to tax. Taxing is very important for the government, because I also like have been involved for a training for the Department of Taxing of Indonesia. They said, how is the blockchain business ecosystem? We want to know how to tax them. And I will say that, because it's like a win-win solution. We need the protection from the government, we need certainty. At the same time, the government still need, okay, how I can make money? If everybody like use the digital asset, I say to them, there will be a lot of huge digital assets. And you must think how to make laws that make you laws to do this kind of taxing. Because it's going to be everywhere from the world, right? Now, like Indonesia, I don't know the context of Indonesia, like they will tax something based on if the company is started in Indonesia. How about if the company is not from Indonesia, but the buyer from Indonesia and the trader is not from Indonesia? How are you going to do it? And then they will start like, oh my God, we are confused. So it's like make a global consensus on about that part. So that's why I think the community and the government must talk together. That's why in here, we are from Indonesian Blockchain and Metaverse Center. We want to bridge that part. Because I understand the community. I also bridge the government to give recommendation what you must do with this kind of situations.
Okay. I'm going to move to the next question. I'm going to take us back to history a little bit. We saw the first coin ever introduced was in 600 BC, and then that changed to paper money in 11th century in China. That was the first promissory note. And then so the coin, then to the note, and then we see it moving towards digital money, plastic money, sorry, which was introduced in the 1960s as a debit card. And then we saw the digital money, which came into existence. My question is there a difference between digital currency and cryptocurrency? Number one, who should be given the mandate to issue the digital dollar? Is it the CBDCs or the crypto community? Is there a difference?
Maybe I can give my opinion. I think still the government still must do that because the government is like the referees in terms of the society. I think the power of the government is how they can be like playing the fair games for everyone. If we're talking about the community, I don't know how's the community, who will monitor the community by the way. In the end, I understand the dreams of African community in the crypto. They want it to be like a more fair and everything. But in the end, there will always be like a big people that will come to the community. They will eat them, the people that are unprotected, the weak one. So that's what's interesting, except we have something else, another form of society order outside the government. That's right now, I don't see it. I can see that some people, okay, the community can do that. But how the community can do for, like, there is a lot of things that happen at FTX and everything. It means like, we need someone to protect us, especially the incompetent persons. Because when we talk about the mass adoptions, a lot of people, they have the gap of skills, the gap of knowledge, that's the government must come from that part. In the society, I don't know how, in a community, if everybody going to community, and a lot of community that we must use, and we must do like, make a policy or make kind of decisions, how they can make decisions if they don't understand about this. And they're just following somebody else. And that's very dangerous for me also. We also see a lot of kind of different kind of social order from the kingdom. Right now it's like modern state and everything, but I don't know if we can make another kind of social order to the words. Maybe the crypto community, but right now I don't see it's coming.
Sure. I think, just to answer the question, if the currency is being issued by the government, perhaps they would think that as see that as a currency, you know. But the point is not about whether you see this as a currency or you recognize this as an asset or not, you know. So from my point of view, is that there should be some check and balance. So from a regulatory standpoint, you know, they give a certain balance, you know, how the currency is going to be used, how it's going to be pegged, so forth and so on. You know, is the community, you know, people or even the retail investors, are we ready to control a certain currency? Maybe not, because no matter what, you know, if you talk about rug pull, you talk about the different issues, I don't think the community as a whole, you know, on the consensus level is able to make the correct decision. But of course, if today, you know, I look at myself as an activist, you know, or maybe I promote decentralization, then of course the thoughts will be very different. You know, decentralized party, they will talk about things that are, you know, we get rid of the government, we get rid of the banks, and then what's next, you know? It's not very feasible in this situation, right? And then the other point that I want to mention, you know, also going back to the first question, you know, how you really want the government to protect their own citizen, you know, how they are going to look at all these cross-border transaction, and how are they going to tax them? You know, some of the government will come back and say, oh, the reason why I come up with CBDC, for example, because it's digitized, you can able to track everything, you know, so when the cross-border transaction comes, oh, they know where the money goes, right? And then they will start to say, okay, this amount, yeah, we are going to tax you, or that guy, I'm going to bring you here for some coffee, free coffee, yeah? Keep asking them where the money is coming from. I think that process is a way for the government to protect, you know, its citizen, and also to find a way to tax. But this model has a lot of detail, behind it. For example, how are we going to enhance the current travel rule, right? How are we going to ensure that, that wallet is tagged to that person and that's the only wallet that they have? So there's a lot of this detail that regulators are trying to solve. But all these questions may have an answer, but it's not perfect because there's always a decentralized system that is, underneath this whole traditional finance. So again, coming back to the point is, I think education is the key, and cryptocurrency, given the high risk and perhaps high return kind of a model, perhaps, you need more education, you need to understand before you put your money in. That's something that ourselves got to really do it,
Mike, you.
Yeah, perhaps just to try to attempt to answer your question. I mean, the world monetary policy has moved quite a lot since 600 BC. But of course, at some point of time, the world used gold as a form of a medium of exchange for goods and services. I think to answer your previous question as well, I think it's a question of alignment of interests. There are different interests from different parties. So a regulator will be interested in what their enforcement rights are, what their regulatory rights are. I think there's also this is also a good time to discuss things like for people who are intending to introduce or create stable coins. What is the difference between digital money, stable coins, and cryptocurrency? One is legal tender, the other is not. One may be used widely in exchange for goods and services. And the other maybe is confined to very limited use, very limited use cases. And I think to also address some of our panel's examples of CBDC, one of the advantages is that it can be purpose-bound money. So instead of just giving a cash bonus, as announced in Singapore, Singapore's a very young country with a very young monetary policy. They can be more granular and more specific in how these disbursements can be made. And that goes to more options in terms of controls. But that may not be what the wider population wants in terms of trade. When we want to trade across different countries, like right now, if you want to trade with Central Asia or East Europe, it may be quite difficult because our banking systems don't allow that. Right. So I think that, taking a discerning approach to differentiate and taking a greater distinction between each form would be helpful. And I think that one of the stakeholders that need to understand this difference might be the younger generation, coming into the world where there are multiple forms of cryptographic transactions and tokens, right? So I think it's a difficult question. It's a very loaded question because right now, even outside of money, there are a lot of things that the world doesn't agree with each other on. Different countries don't necessarily agree on oil prices, for example. So we're actually moving backwards in time, and whether that's a problem or opportunity, I think depends on whose lens we're taking a perspective from.
See, Satoshi created a currency, not debt. He created a different form of money. But we saw in the beginning that governments were ignorant about crypto, and especially in May 2020, is when only 35 countries were considering CBDC. And currently today, there are 114 countries representing over 95% of the global GDP have been exploring CBDCs. And 11 countries out of which are fully launched their own CBDCs, especially in the Caribbean and Nigeria. And we also saw with the stable coins and CBDCs. Now the question is, will they coexist? Will stable coins and CBDCs, is it possible for them to coexist?
I'd say short answer is yes, they can coexist. Whether people value them the same, I would question. I mean, even in Singapore, So if I have a Singapore $5 bill and I have Singapore $5 on my Grab wallet, that is not exactly the same because the Grab wallet is only as useful as the vendor that accepts Grab, right? So you can have a stable coin that's backed by XYZ, but if people don't accept it, right, and or there's transaction costs relating to the transfer, it is not the same. And I do not think we should expect governments to say, hey, we are fine with some private actor creating a currency that's equivalent to us and is the same but has cooler features. I just think it's highly unlikely that governments would agree to that happening unless they are issuing it themselves.
There is a huge difference between stablecoins and CBDCs because stablecoins have a decentralized nature. While on the other hand, the CBDCs are centralized, controlled by one centralized entity. So it's not truly a cryptocurrency.
There's few points I just want to clarify. So number one, I think stablecoin is not decentralized. It's still owned by a centralized party, right? Number two that I want to point out is that, whatever that we are trying to do in the cryptocurrency space, there's no real direct relation to what CBDC is trying to do. Because to be honest, CBDC is just digital fiat. They might be using maybe blockchain technology to do some of the clearing and so forth, but in no ways they are using cryptocurrency as a form of transaction. So these are the two corrections. But I 100% agree with Chris, that yes, I think both can coexist, but some of my own friends who are in the ministry, they were saying that is it possible, for us to be issuing a stable coin as well, that could be a separate discussion, because then that would be a government-backed stable coin, but then that's not a CBDC. So these are all very different school of thoughts that we are talking about. But I'll leave that to the rest of the panelists, to discuss about this.
Okay, this is interesting, but for me, I think this can be coexist, but the stable coin will be like the currency for transaction in your own ecosystems. Can you imagine, like, in the future, maybe people will buy more virtual goods. It can be cross-border, but then you are in one ecosystem, and then it can be access on that part. But if you wanted to go to, like, in one country, that's something that you must use as that part is like your CBDCs. Because now, with this digitalization right now, we can build our own community, and it's borderless. It can be everywhere. I always also talk to the government. Even the tax government, I said, like, there will be huge virtual assets, virtual products that maybe our generation don't imagine. But Generation Alpha will do that. They will have their own house in digital, and they have their own car and everything. And that will be the ecosystem. Why? If I have my ecosystem, for example, in Solana or something, or everywhere, and why not? They will use that part. I think that's the coexistence will be like that part. The government also cannot regulate because they cannot do that. It's just only like in one game. But the game in the future might be much huge and more impact than now. And maybe will not relate with that also because I'm not in the generations, but I believe in the alpha generation they will do that a lot. And the government must also understand that how to do the taxing. Because their mindset is always how I can protect and how I can make a tax for that. Because I still financing the infrastructure. Physical infrastructure still need the tax from this community, right? That's how we can deal with it.
Thank you. After the FTX collapse, we saw there was a kind of fear generated in a lot of people in trusting centralized exchanges. And a lot of us went in saying, your coins, your wallet, your keys. There was so much going on in the past couple of months. So in the DeFi world, will centralized institutions exist? And especially in particularly centralized exchanges, is it possible for them to be in existence? Matt?
Thank you very much. Well, I think the short answer is if you are an unregulated, centralized exchange, prospects probably are not too good for you. There's certainly going to be a drive to regulation and licensing for the centralized exchanges. On the wider point about your wallet, your keys, decentralization versus centralization, obviously, I think most people in this room probably come from the Web3 kind of school of thought, the Dr. Gavin Wood school of thought, that you want to remove middlemen, have a decentralized kind of autonomous economy where some of the excesses of the Web 2 era, the ages of big tech, are limited. That's the that's the kind of certainly the I would say the common ideological framework of most people in this community. Now, I can see the importance of that argument. However, selfishly speaking, as an arbitration lawyer, if there is a level of centralization, or at least a level of permissioned, a permissioned aspect to a network, then that, for me, if I have a client who is either a developer or a user or an investor, if something does go wrong and they do want legal redress, it's much easier for me to help them get that legal redress, whether through international arbitration, which is international, confidential, can only happen with the consent of the parties, and therefore is allowed by these permission networks, or if needs be by the courts, which is a much harder way to make recovery. So when you lose centralization, it may be in line with the philosophy, and there may be benefits that go along with that. But there are also, when things go wrong, it is ultimately your wallet, and in a decentralized environment, then there may be little redress when things do go wrong.
I also think over time, regulators are going to break down what decentralized means. So in a way, Citibank is decentralized because they have a New York entity and a Singapore entity and Hong Kong, and different pieces do different things. So in a DeFi protocol, if all you have is code, you don't have an entity. But somebody created that code, whether a person or an entity. And that person or entity can be regulated. Now you can say, well, Chris, 10 people created the code. All 10 people can potentially be regulated wherever they are. So over time, decentralized can be, you just circle it all up, who is doing what, is that a regulated activity in that jurisdiction? And the reason regulators are going to care, what we've talked about before, tax. They want everybody paying their taxes, and the money, the fees are going somewhere.
I think the quick answer again is yes, they can coexist. In fact, you can see that happening in a lot of centralized exchange right now. They offer both centralized services and decentralized services. And because both centralized and decentralized trade some of the similar coin, I do see that centralized exchange is acting as a police. Maybe it's the wrong word, but and also a bank, because centralized exchange with their creative, financial inputs, they actually provide liquidity, to the DEXs, right? And then if you look back, when we talk about decentralization, as many projects, they are just all these so-called leaders are just working behind a profile picture, right? So it's not like Citibank, you know who the guy is, right? So that profile picture guy, if he's able to make some gains, the first thing that they usually will do is that they will tag and put the money to a centralized exchange. Then centralized exchange will be the withdrawal point, right? So that is also another point to recognize who is who. So that's the reason why I said the exchange, centralized exchange, is actually more like a police, in that sense. So can it be coexist? I think, again, the answer is yes.
Okay. In the whole blockchain ecosystem, the real issue hasn't been the blockchain technology. The technology is here to stay. We saw it's been evolving. But the real issue in the whole ecosystem has been the legal issue, you know. So, and a lot of firms out there are struggling with compliance. So, can all firms, especially in the ecosystem over here, be compliant to all the laws or to the laws? And we have some lawyers here, yes.
I mean, yeah, it's super expensive. One thing I'd say, regulation, the burden of regulation increases. I tell everybody you're going to hate to be regulated, right? So when you sign up for that license, you better have a theory about why you're doing it, because it's going to be brutal. So it's not that it cannot be done, but it's really onerous. And if you're expecting every country to have the same standards, yeah, that's not the way it's going to work.
Yeah, sure. I've got a slightly different perspective again. So we've been talking a lot about governments and regulation and the opinions and guidance papers and it seems like every day we get another 1,000 page kind of guidance from one jurisdiction or another. But what you see if you are a litigation lawyer like myself and you're helping clients recover assets or preventing other parties doing things, is you start to notice that the way in which different courts start to make decisions starts to be quite common. And so, for instance, courts might say, even though this is a decentralized blockchain, if the individual who has suffered the loss is habitually resident in one jurisdiction, so if you have a Singaporean-based guy, even though the blockchain is decentralized, maybe it's proof of work and there's activity taking place all around the globe, the Singapore courts will take jurisdiction and will make an order. And there's other principles, and I think of this as almost soft law, because it's not necessarily binding. A Singapore judge might not necessarily apply strictly what a US, a New York judge has decided, but he or she may be persuaded by that judgment. So there are some I won't go into detail now, but there are some extremely important cases which will be decided either late this year or early next year, and they cover topics such as what duty do developers owe to blockchain users, if any duty at all, to what extent, when is an arbitrage trade a good trade, and when is it an exploit, for instance, and then a number of other issues which the regulators maybe haven't even thought of, but because they've arisen in practice, you'll have decided decisions. And as you get more and more of these cases, you will start to see a soft law develop, which in some ways is good, because it means that there's a bit more certainty as to what your rights and obligations are when you make an investment or enter into a collaboration.
Coming back to the question again, I think there's no real rules or regulations around blockchain. I think the question was about blockchain, but I think there are a lot of different rules about cryptocurrency right now. But having again, coming back to the point about uniform regulation, is kind of tough, right? Different jurisdiction, different judges have different kind of a perspective over a certain asset, and right now we are treading on new grounds. I've seen a case the other day about a retail investor stick their NFT into a decentralized platform, and then they forgot, and then someone bought the NFT. And then, long story short is that the judge is now saying that he's going to sue that address, which is decentralized and you don't know who he is. To me, I felt that it's kind of a joke. But of course, to some of my friends, they say that, wow, this is really amazing. If you can sue this and you get the money back or get an NFT back, well, that's amazing. But then these are actually kind of useless because you don't know who they are. We are paying the different lawyers to fight a case that might not have any ending. So again, we just need to be more realistic. Where we stand and how we look at regulations and how different regulations can protect us, you know, versus just fighting a case for the sake of fighting, right?
Yeah, actually, I'd agree with one of the points there, which is that you have to know the limits. So as you say, if you have a self-custodied wallet, it's quite hard for somebody to touch that wallet currently. I mean, the authorities will always try. They will always try and find points of ingress, whether that be the developer of a wallet, etc. But frankly, if you're in if somebody steals your assets and takes them to a centralized exchange, you can write to that exchange and potentially get your assets back. It isn't necessarily the case, or is much more difficult if it's a self-custodied wallet. And certainly, if I have clients who are looking at legal action, that's something they should know at the outset, whether or not, what the prospects are that they'll recover anything.
I think it's important for every project out there, whether it's an institution or a startup, to be compliant with the laws wherever you are registered, you know, and having the books from a taxation perspective as well. But the good thing is, there are about 320 million users worldwide right now, and there are about 18,000 businesses worldwide that accept different form of cryptocurrency as a payment. And according to Gartner, by 2024, at least 20% of large enterprises will use digital currencies for payment, store of value or collateral, which will disrupt the current financial networks and business models. So DeFi is here to stay. It has been evolving and it will continue to evolve. Well, thank you so much, panel, for your time and for your thoughts, for your time as well. Thank you.
Round of applause once again, ladies and gentlemen, for the panel discussion, Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Laws and Regulation 2023.